So here to talk through this Pentosnake by Nikolai. It has a very constrained solve, in part because it's hard to both draw a snake and have just pentominoes left over as the white space, which means that with this given seed in the lower right corner, nothing else needs to be specified. So I often will solve this and use a system like Nurikabe in terms of shading the snake to be ocean, avoiding 2x2. A snake can't have a 2x2 shape, and then the whites, I'm imagining I'm making islands, so I often use dots and draw in lines to connect them, so you'll see that as I go through this all. The first place I've found to be helpful is just to specify one cell above the F clue. If this were part of the snake is going to start coming down like this, and it leaves no room for the F at all, and so in every possible F that you can fit into the grid, that will leave a valid snake, it has to use this cell. The subtle part that comes after that, I think there are a few different F shapes. You could go through and test them all to find which one is the required one, but this cell is not used in any of the possible F shapes, and when it's not used, my next steps in the grid were to just start drawing the snake in, and when I do that, get these cells as unused, and I get this is the look of the F. This is the only way an F can complete that way, and now we've sort of finished off an island. We'll shade all the cells around it like we do in Nurikabe, and what we actually have here is we can connect them all because we're making a single snake path through. Looks like this. The cell is white, white, white. If we go through our normal counterfactuals, if this were part of the snake would take all these cells and cut this off, so this has to be part of the pentomino. In a normal Nurikabe state, like knowing this is a 5-cell island, I know that I'm using one of these cells, and so I'd shade this. But there's actually something stronger we can do because this is forms a snake path. And this is where, some people may say in the solve they ended up guessing. It's actually not required to do any guessing here, but it is helpful when you have a scenario where there are exactly two options to draw out the look of those two options together and see if there are commonalities. And so what I'm drawing, what I'm tracing here is the situation where B is the last cell of the pentomino, and so this is the look of the snake. And in the situation where A is the last cell of the pentomino, this other line is that state. And so the lines both use this cell, and so this cell is part of the snake in either possible solution. We don't know if A or B is valid in the final solution here, but we know that in either case, that cell is shaded. Similarly, these two cells are shaded and part of the snake. And there's even one more, which is a little more subtle, but the snake either takes this cell or that cell, but the cell here has to be white. I'm going to mark that exactly one of these cells is white and exactly one of these cells is white, and that will help me when I get to counting shapes a little bit later in the puzzle. But what you see is that by properly exploring the options around an either-or choice, we got a little more into the grid than you typically get. I also get these cells as part of another group. These four can't connect with these two, so the snake's going to have to come into this cell here and make a turn. This group can't end up being a U pentomino shape. That's actually impossible because the snake end will have to come into the U but also wrap around, so this cell is part of the snake, which means this is also part of the snake. We get another diagonal connection. Got another A-B scenario coming up, so again I'm going to suggest we explore drawing in the snake path in both cases. So this is drawing the situation if B is left white, and this is drawing the situation if A is left white. What we see, just as we did before, the sort of place we had two cells that extended up and were contained, is that in both states these are part of the snake. And so I'll clean up the other stuff around it, but once again, you don't have to actually guess if it's A or B and like just work far enough in the puzzle to find a contradiction to deduce it's the other one. This is really a case where you're just looking at the either or situations together and finding the fixed cells. And the fixed cells are where you can make your headway. So now we have to get into this corner. And I marked here before that we have just one white cell specified, and notice it can't continue further down. So effectively for this pentomino group, it has two cells. In the next row above, we can take a third and a fourth, but it has to use at least one of the white cells here, which means that the snake is going to have to come over the top and wrap. Once we have these used, what you'll see is that this corner, if it's left unused, is not going to leave enough room for a valid pentomino shape to form. And so we quickly get actually this scenario where the snake uses the upper right corner fully. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 white cells marked. So where we actually have to just consider the last one, it's either this top cell or the bottom cell. If it's the top cell, it's going to leave a cul-de-sac. The snake comes in and can't go out. It would actually form a U pentomino if you look at it most closely. So it uses the bottom cell. This is then how the snake looks around there. We have another either or choice, so we don't yet know if this comes down or not, but what we can do is start to see that some of these cells on the left of this shape have to be part of the snake. For instance, this cell can't be the last white cell. It's also the case this cell can't be the last white cell, then you wouldn't have enough room for the snake to come around. And the thing here, like there is again an A-B sketch. Here, the A-B sketch, and we don't have to go very far with it, will show you a contradiction. And the contradiction will come in when I actually put this as part of the snake. If that's part of the snake, the other wrap is over here, and it doesn't leave enough room for a pentomino. So this has to be open. It finishes off an L-shaped pentomino island at the top. It being the contradiction finally pushes over here, that pushes here, pushes up, pushes there, pushes down, leaves this open, pushes across. And so everything that used to be in an either or state now got fixed because we found an end of a deduction chain. And we didn't do that by guessing at the start, we did it by thinking our way through and getting to where it actually gets the conflict. Like the limitations on this right side of space actually cause critical limitations at the top of the grid for space. Get as much of this as we can in. Here we do have to, and this is probably the last hard area to finish, you do have to again sort of think about cells that can or cannot be part of the snake. The most critical deductions up top are going to be to keep these two ends separate. And so situations that would bring the ends very close, for instance, it looks like taking this cell as part of the snake. It can't connect up, so it has to come across, but as it comes across by this time, like the end of the snake as it comes over, leaving a pentomino, these would form a loop. And so one first place you can see would cause a lot of issues is for this cell to be white. Turns out another cell you can do this with somewhat effectively is right here. And the deduction, it seems actually the most interesting about that cell is to keep it white, which also means this is white. And if that's the case, you get this kind of wrapping around, and again, that forms a loop. And so what you can show in the grid is that the cell is white, the cell is not. We still need to keep these ends separate, and we also need to make sure we have 5 cells that can be white, so we get this drawn. Notice that these cells have to be left unused. We need to leave enough space to start forming a group, so I'll mark those in. These ends can't connect, so this has to be white. That finishes off this shape. That's going to make this white, so that's going to suggest this. And we'll just make sure we have these ends working. That makes this white. Now we have all the rest of the snake shape around the F that's forced. That's this. That leaves white, white. This needs to take one more white cell. This is also a white cell, so this is where we're at for this. We need to use this 5th cell. Down here, the last thing I put in the grid is also a pentomino, so we can see that this is the single unique solution of the whole grid. Say is a pretty interesting puzzle, particularly how just one clue is enough to constrain, with the snake ends, constrain the full solution. What you saw in my approach to it, and this will work in a few other puzzle styles. It's not that every puzzle style will have either or scenarios pop up, but in places where there are either or scenarios where you can at least picture them both at the same time, finding cells like this cell, these cells, and this unused cell that are true in both states. Similarly, these cells is both true in both states, is a way to make logical deduction even where you have uncertainty. And so that there is initially in this grid uncertainty about if this is a P or a Y is where some people get frustrated and not see how to move forward. But if you're able to work through the uncertainty with what are certain cells, and that's how I got over to this corner, we got to where exploring the uncertainty up here, it cancels immediately unless it comes over and is a Y. So that was at least a lesson that you can apply in general in puzzles, particularly snake-like puzzles, where there often feels like it's a lot about tweaking, but in principle, it's about knowing what is for sure in any states of the grid and converging ultimately to the one solution. So hope you enjoyed this puzzle and also the guest contributors week, and we'll see you again soon.